When my husband, Adil, got a job in another city, I never imagined how lonely our small house would start to feel. For the first few weeks, the silence was comforting. I thought I could handle it. But slowly, that silence began to feel heavier, pressing against my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. Every sound, the ticking clock, the creaking door, the echo of my own footsteps reminded me that I was alone. Adil's father, Mr. Salman, often checked in to make sure I was fine. He lived just a few streets away and had always treated me kindly, even before I married his son. He was quiet, soft-spoken, and had the sort of presence that made you feel safe. Whenever Adil couldn't visit, Mr. Salman would bring groceries, fix small things around the house, or sometimes sit with me over tea. One rainy afternoon, the power went out. The house darkened, and I found myself staring out the window, listening to the rhythmic sound of rain on the glass. There was a knock at the door. When I opened it, there he was, soaked from the rain, holding an umbrella and a thermos. "I thought you might be scared," he said gently. "The weather's getting worse." He set the thermos down on the table and began wiping the water from his arms with a towel I handed him. For some reason, watching him calm, kind, and completely unbothered by the storm brought me a strange comfort. We sat in the dim candlelight, sipping tea. Listening to the thunder roll outside, he started telling me stories about his youth, how he used to travel, how he met Adil's mother, how different life used to be. I laughed more than I had in weeks. But beneath that laughter, something else lingered, something unfamiliar. I caught myself watching him a little too long when he smiled. I didn't understand why. When the thunder cracked louder, I flinched. Instinctively, he reached out and placed his hand over mine. "It's okay," he said, his voice low and reassuring. "It's just the storm." I nodded, but the warmth of his hands stayed on my skin longer than it should have. After that night, he began stopping by more often, always with a reason. A broken light switch. Groceries I hadn't asked for. Soup he said he'd made too much of. And each time I convinced myself it was just kindness. That he saw me as his son's wife, nothing more. But one evening, as I was folding laundry in the bedroom, I heard him call my name from the hallway. He had come to drop off some medicine for my headache. I turned around to thank him, but he stepped closer than usual. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. He looked tired, as if something had been weighing on his heart for days. "Are you all right?" I asked, placing the folded shirt aside. He hesitated, then said softly, "You remind me of her sometimes. Adil's mother. The way you care for everyone and forget yourself?" I didn't know what to say. There was sorrow in his eyes, something that felt both familiar and forbidden. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the slow hum of the ceiling fan. Then, realizing how close we were, I stepped back and said, quietly, "You should rest, Baba. It's late." He nodded, forcing a smile. "You're right. I'll see you tomorrow." But, as he turned to leave, I saw something in his expression, not desire, not guilt, just a loneliness that mirrored my own. When he left, I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding. What had just happened? Why did it feel like something had shifted between us? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the hallway, every rustle of the wind outside, reminded me of his face in that dim light, tired, kind, and human. I tried to convince myself that it was nothing, that I was overthinking. But deep down, I knew something dangerous had begun. Not in words, not in actions, but in silence. The next morning felt heavier than usual. Sunlight poured through the curtains, bright and golden, but it only made the silence sharper. I busied myself with housework, hoping movement would quiet my thoughts. Yet every small thing, the chair where he had sat, the cup he had used, pulled me back into that moment from last night, when my phone rang and Adil's name flashed on the screen. I felt a sting of guilt before even answering. "Hey," he said cheerfully. "How are things at home?" I forced a smile even though he couldn't see me. "Everything's fine. Your father dropped by again yesterday? Fixed the kitchen light." "That's good," he replied. "He worries too much, but I'm glad he's there. At least you're not alone." His words made my heart twist. I wasn't alone, and that was the problem. Later that day, I stepped into the garden to water the plants. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Mr. Salman standing by the gate, holding a small box of tools. "The fan in your room," he said, avoiding my eyes. "You mentioned it, makes a noise." I nodded, unsure what to say. It wasn't broken. I had only mentioned it offhand the week before. Inside, the air was still and thick with awkwardness. He opened the fan's casing, checking wires that didn't need fixing. And I stood there pretending to tidy things that were already neat. Neither of us spoke for several minutes, yet 1,000 unspoken thoughts hung between us. Finally, he broke the silence. "About last night," he said quietly, not looking up. I froze. "I shouldn't have made you uncomfortable," he continued. "It was wrong of me." "You didn't," I replied quickly. Maybe too quickly. "You were just being kind." He smiled faintly. "Still, I should be careful. People talk, and I don't ever want Adil to misunderstand." His words brought both relief and disappointment. emotions that had no right to exist side by side. I nodded, forcing calm. You're right. It's best if things stay simple, but life rarely stays simple. Over the next few weeks, the visits continued, though shorter, more cautious. Yet the small things spoke louder than before, the way his voice softened when he said my name, the way he lingered at the door as if waiting for something neither of us dared to admit. I told myself it was all in my head, but my heart refused to listen. One afternoon, I was rearranging Adil's wardrobe when I found an old family photo album. The picture showed a younger Mr. Salmon beside his late wife, smiling, alive, full of warmth. I sat on the floor, flipping through the pages, feeling as if I'd trespassed into a life I had no right to touch. When he came later that evening to return a borrowed book, I couldn't help mentioning it. I saw your old photos today, I said softly. You both looked happy. He exhaled slowly. She was my balance. When she passed, everything lost color. His gaze drifted toward the framed wedding photo of Adil and me on the wall. You and my son remind me of that time. You bring life back into this house. Something inside me broke at his words, a mixture of compassion and fear. I wanted to step away to remind him and myself where the lines were. But I also wanted to tell him that I understood loneliness, that I too felt unseen, unheard. Half-alive before either of us could speak again, the phone rang. It was Adil, a video call this time. I answered, trying to steady my voice. Hi, love. Mr. Salmon moved discreetly out of frame, pretending to look through the bookshelf. Adil smiled through the screen. You look tired. Are you okay? I'm fine, I lied. Just a long day. Dad, you there? He asked suddenly. Mr. Salmon stepped forward. Yes, Beta. Just checking up on her. The brief conversation that followed felt like standing on the edge of a secret cliff. Every smile, every word was balanced carefully, hiding everything that couldn't be said. When the call ended, I felt my chest tighten. The guilt was no longer quiet, it screamed inside me. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. We both need to be careful, he said. Some feelings are better buried. I nodded, unable to answer. That night, I lay awake again, listening to the fan he had fixed, the one that had never been broken. Its steady rhythm reminded me of his words. Some feelings are better buried. But what if they refused to stay buried? What if, in trying to bury them, we only made them grow deeper? I closed my eyes, wishing morning would come quickly, yet dreading what it might bring. Days turned into weeks, and the uneasy calm in the house began to crack. I had stopped messaging Adil as often, afraid that my voice might betray something I didn't yet understand. The guilt had started to live inside me like an unwelcome guest, quiet at first, then louder each night. One afternoon, while dusting the shelves, I found the book Mr. Salmon had lent me, its bookmark still where I'd left it weeks ago. Tucked between the pages was a small note in his handwriting. Sometimes caring becomes a burden when hearts forget their limits. I stared at it for a long time, my hands trembling. It wasn't a confession, yet it said everything neither of us dared to speak aloud. That evening, he came by again, not with groceries or tools, but simply because he said the house felt too empty. We sat in the living room, silence stretching between us. The ticking clock was the only sound. I found your note, I finally said. He looked down. I shouldn't have written it. It's honest, I replied softly. But honesty hurts, doesn't it? He nodded. It does. And the truth is, I've been trying to fill a space that can't be filled. You remind me of family comfort, of what I lost. But I know this isn't right. The words cut deeper than anger ever could. Because he was right, and yet I couldn't hate him for saying it. I never wanted this, I whispered. Any of it. I just wanted peace. And you'll have it, he said firmly. But peace starts with distance. For a moment, I thought he was going to walk out and never return. But instead, he stepped closer, placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of farewell, not longing. Take care of yourself, he said. And take care of my son. When the door closed behind him, the silence felt different. It wasn't the heavy, lonely kind anymore. It was the silence of something ending painfully, but necessarily. Adil returned home 2 weeks later. I stood at the station watching his train pull in, forcing my smile to be steady. He looked tired but happy to see me. Feels good to be home, he said, wrapping his arms around me. It's been quiet, I answered, my voice low. Your father visited often. He really looked after me. He nodded, smiling. He told me. I'm grateful he was here when I couldn't be. The irony burned inside me. Gratitude when he had no idea what kind of storm had been brewing under his own roof that night. While unpacking his bags, Adil found the same book on the shelf. You finished it? He asked. Almost, I said quickly, taking it from his hands. It's good, thoughtful. He laughed lightly and changed the subject, but I could feel Mr. Salmon's words still pressed between those pages, like a heartbeat that refused to die. The next morning, Adil suggested visiting his father together for dinner. My stomach tightened. Sure, I said, masking the unease. When we arrived, Mr. Salmon greeted us warmly, his usual calm restored. The meal was simple, quiet. Nothing in his tone betrayed what had once existed between us, that brief, dangerous closeness. Yet every time our eyes met, I felt the weight of what we both knew. After dinner, Adil went outside to take a phone call. I began clearing the dishes, and Mr. Salmon helped, standing beside me at the sink. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. He missed you and you. I asked before I could stop myself. He paused, then answered softly, I'm learning to miss people the right way. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't break the fragile peace we'd rebuilt. When we left that night, Adil chatted happily the whole ride home. I nodded, smiled, and kept my eyes on the passing lights. Somewhere inside, I knew a chapter had ended. Weeks later, I found myself standing in the same bedroom where everything had begun. The quiet space, the fixed fan, the ghost of unspoken things. I opened the window and let the air in. For the first time in months, it didn't feel suffocating. I realized then that infidelity doesn't always happen in actions. Sometimes it starts in thoughts, in loneliness, in the spaces between kindness and desire, but acknowledging it, ending it before it destroys everything, is its own kind of courage. As I looked around, I whispered to the empty room, it's over. And maybe, finally, it was.